Cancer, thank you for spending this time with me today. Before we begin, I want to share something with you. I felt genuinely drawn to do this reading. Not because the cards that came through were especially shocking, not because of some dramatic revelation, but because throughout the entire process of connecting with Cancer's energy, one theme kept showing up again and again. And that theme is intuition. It feels as though many of you have known the answer for quite some time now. For one reason or another, you've been waiting for another sign, another confirmation, another moment of clarity that would finally allow you to fully trust what you've already been feeling deep inside. And that is exactly what I want to explore with you in today's reading. Let's see what story these cards want to tell about the journey your heart has been quietly moving through over these past weeks and months. Sometimes the most important changes in life don't arrive with a loud announcement. They arrive quietly, like waking up one morning and realizing you're no longer thinking about the thing that kept you awake for months. Like sitting in your car after a long day, staring at a line of red taillights ahead of you, and suddenly noticing that a burden you've been carrying doesn't feel quite as heavy anymore. Cancer. That's exactly what the energy at the beginning of this reading feels like. On the surface, everything may seem familiar. You still wake up at the same time. You still answer the same calls. You still travel the same roads. But somewhere deep inside, something is shifting. The Moon card comes through here in a way that feels incredibly familiar for Cancer. Not because this card is about mystery, but because it reminds me of those chapters in life when you've had to keep moving forward without being able to see the entire path ahead. You could only see the first few steps, then the next few, and then the next. Many people struggle with that feeling. They want everything to be clear right away. They want answers before they begin. But Cancer often moves through life differently. There have been times when your heart knew something your mind couldn't explain. There have been people who entered your life and later walked away. There have been doors that closed before you understood why. There have been plans that looked perfect on paper but unfolded in a completely different way. In moments like that, confusion can feel unavoidable. It's like trying to put together a puzzle while several important pieces are still missing. What's interesting is that when you look back now, those missing pieces seem to be finding their place. Not all at once, not in some dramatic or life-changing moment. More like opening an old box in the corner of your home and unexpectedly finding photographs from years ago. Each picture by itself may not seem especially meaningful, but when you place them side by side, a story begins to emerge. That's the feeling the World card brings into this reading. A sense that a circle is slowly beginning to close. Experiences that once felt disconnected are starting to connect. Lessons that once broke your heart are beginning to reveal a deeper meaning. Encounters that once seemed random are starting to show why they mattered. Cancer tends to carry memories for a very long time. You don't forget easily. You hold on to emotions the way some people hold on to treasured possessions. Because of that, it sometimes takes longer to fully understand a chapter of your life. But there is a beautiful maturity present in this energy. Less pressure to find all the answers immediately. Less need to chase every sign or prove something to yourself. In its place is a growing trust in the rhythm of your own journey. Then the Star card appears. And what I feel from this card isn't blind optimism. It feels more like the moment after a long storm. The sky isn't completely clear yet. The ground is still wet. Puddles still reflect the light. But somehow you know the worst of the weather has already passed. The Star card feels like a small light beginning to glow inside Cancer. Not bright, not dramatic. Just enough to help you realize that maybe you're not lost anymore. Not because every question has been answered, but because your intuition is becoming easier to hear. You're beginning to recognize what brings you peace, what leaves you drained, who expands your energy, and who makes you shrink back into yourself. That wisdom isn't coming from outside of you. It's something your heart has been quietly reminding you of all along. Like a lighthouse standing far out along the coastline. It doesn't pull the ship in any particular direction. It simply stands there, quiet, steady, providing just enough guidance for someone at sea to know where they are. And as these feelings become clearer, Cancers may begin to realize that what once felt like confusion may have contained far more truth than you originally thought. Because as we move deeper into this reading, the experiences you've been carrying are becoming more than memories. They seem ready to reveal why they appeared in your life in the first place. The Queen of Cups card enters this story like a woman sitting by a window in the fading light of late afternoon. She isn't trying to change the weather. She isn't trying to keep the sun in the sky a little longer. She isn't trying to hold on to things that have already left. She simply sits there, quietly observing, and somehow she understands more than she says. This energy makes me think of many cancers who have moved through a chapter of life where emotions once felt exhausting. Not because you felt too little, but because you felt so much. You could walk into a room and sense tension before anyone spoke a single word. You could hear an ordinary sentence and still feel what was hiding underneath it. You could see a smile on someone's face and somehow know they were carrying something much heavier inside. For a long time, that gift may have felt like a burden, because when you feel that much, you often end up carrying that much. Carrying other people's moods, carrying the responsibility of making everyone feel okay, carrying things that never truly belonged to you in the first place. The wounds of the past seem to have changed the way cancer looks at all of this. Not by closing your heart, but by helping you understand the difference between empathy and sacrifice, the difference between loving someone and losing yourself. The Queen of Cups card is not cold. She still loves, she still listens, she is still gentle. But she no longer allows every wave outside of her to determine the weather inside her heart. That is a very quiet form of growth. Most people won't notice it immediately, but the person living through it feels it deeply. The High Priestess card appears beside her like a silent companion. If the Queen of Cups card represents the heart, then the High Priestess card feels like that quiet inner voice you've ignored more than once. It never shouts, it never argues, it never tries to prove itself right. It simply appears in ordinary moments. When you first step into a conversation, when someone new enters your life, when you're reading a message, when you're listening to an offer, or sometimes as nothing more than a passing feeling that is difficult to explain. The kind of feeling that makes you pause and think, I don't know why, but something about this doesn't feel quite right. There may have been many times when cancer ignored that feeling, because you wanted to see the good in people. You wanted to give someone a chance. You wanted to trust. You wanted to keep the peace. You wanted things to work out in the best possible way. But experience is a very particular teacher. It doesn't talk much. It simply repeats the lesson until we finally understand it. Some memories from the past may have taught cancer that intuition isn't here to make you afraid. It's here to protect your peace. What I find interesting is that the High Priestess card and the Queen of Cups card don't create a hard or defensive energy. Quite the opposite. Together they create a softness that is incredibly strong. Like still water. It appears gentle, but it is deep enough that a small stone cannot disturb it. The Nine of Swords card tells a different story. Not a story about pain happening right now, but a story about long nights that once kept you awake. The nights when you blamed yourself. The nights when you wondered whether you had done something wrong. The nights when you searched for answers to questions that never had simple explanations. The Nine of Swords card doesn't appear here as a shadow waiting ahead. It appears more like evidence of roads you've already traveled. Like the scratches on a suitcase carried by someone who has spent years moving from place to place. Those marks don't hurt anymore, but they remind you of how long the journey has been. And what stands out most is that cancer no longer looks at those scars the same way. Instead of seeing them as proof of hurt, you're beginning to see them as proof of growth. The disappointments taught you what sincerity looks like. The misunderstandings taught you who truly listens. The heartbreaks taught you the value of peace. Something is changing in the way cancer experiences other people. Not because you're becoming more suspicious. Not because you're becoming more closed off. You're simply seeing more clearly. And when someone begins to see clearly, the choices placed in front of them begin to carry an entirely different meaning. It's like standing in front of two doors that look exactly the same. Everyone around you only notices the surface. Meanwhile, your heart is quietly recognizing that the real difference exists much deeper than that. And that deeper difference isn't always something you can explain. Sometimes it shows up as a pause, a hesitation, a feeling that lingers longer than it should. The Two of Pentacles card comes through with a very familiar feeling. It doesn't feel like a crisis. It doesn't feel like a major turning point. It feels quieter than that. An invitation, a conversation, an opportunity, a plan. A new possibility has entered your life and slowly started asking for your attention. At first glance, everything seems reasonable. Other people might look at it and say it sounds good, interesting, worth exploring. But sometimes what makes cancer stop isn't what is being said. It's what isn't being said. A pause in a conversation. A feeling you can't quite name while reading a message. A subtle lack of connection that nobody else seems to notice. A tiny detail that should have been easy to dismiss, yet stays in your mind much longer than expected. The Two of Pentacles card feels like someone standing between two different rhythms of life. One side is familiar, one side is new, one side feels safe. One side carries the possibility of change. What makes this card so interesting isn't figuring out which choice is objectively better. It's the realization that not every opportunity is meant to be pursued. And that can be a difficult lesson. Many of us grow up believing that opportunity is always a good thing. That if something arrives at our doorstep, we should be grateful. We should say yes. We should be open. We should give it a chance. But adult life is often more complicated than that. Some doors open only to help us understand what we truly want. Some invitations arrive only to show us what no longer fits. The Four of Cups card sits quietly beside the Two of Pentacles card like an old friend who has lived through many rainy seasons. This is not someone who rushes, not someone easily swept away by excitement, not someone who judges everything by appearances. This card makes me think of those ordinary moments in life when someone offers you something that a few years ago you would have accepted immediately. Yet now your first response is silence, not because you've become pessimistic, not because you've lost faith, but because you're listening to yourself. Cancer is often known for being deeply emotional. What people don't talk about as often is how Cancer gradually learns the art of slowing down. You no longer feel the need to answer everything immediately. You no longer feel pressure to decide the moment an opportunity appears. You no longer fear that saying, "Let me think about it," will somehow cause something good to disappear. The Four of Cups card feels like someone sitting at the kitchen table on a quiet morning. The coffee is still warm. The phone rests nearby. A message is waiting for a response. Yet instead of rushing to reply, they simply sit there, paying attention to how they feel. And sometimes that silence says more than any explanation ever could. The Two of Swords card enters the story with a very different energy, not loud, not emotional, just a moment standing at a crossroads. What fascinates me about this card is that it doesn't make me think of confusion. It makes me think of honesty. Because some difficult decisions aren't hard, because we don't know what feels right. They're hard because we know. The challenge is accepting it. Accepting that something beautiful may not be meant for us. Accepting that an attractive opportunity may not bring peace. Accepting that the heart sometimes understands something before the mind catches up. These three cards create a fascinating movement together. The Two of Pentacles card introduces a new possibility. The Four of Cups card asks for stillness. The Two of Swords card asks for honesty. None of them are trying to push Cancer forward. None of them are pulling you toward a specific direction. They're simply placing a question in front of you. What truly fits the life you're trying to build? What is genuinely worthy of your energy? What allows your heart to feel at ease instead of constantly having to convince itself? Questions like these rarely arrive with immediate answers. They follow you through a workday. They follow you into the grocery store. They ride home with you in the car. They stay with you during those final moments of the evening when the room grows quiet and the noise of the outside world begins to fade. And it is often inside those very ordinary moments of silence that something starts becoming clearer. Like holding an object in your hands and suddenly realizing that the thing you once believed you needed no longer fits the life you're living now. Like holding an object in your hands and suddenly realizing that the thing you once believed you needed no longer fits the life you're living now. That realization rarely arrives during life's big moments. It usually shows up in ordinary ones. While cleaning out an old drawer, while rereading messages from months ago, while passing a place that once carried so much emotion, or simply while looking at yourself in the mirror and realizing that the person staring back at you has changed far more than you thought. The Four of Cups card is still here, but this time it no longer feels connected to weighing a decision. Instead, it feels like someone sitting on a quiet porch in the late afternoon, not chasing anything, not trying to hold on to anything, just taking the time to understand what has truly changed within. One of the hardest lessons for Cancer is not learning how to love. It's learning that not everything you love is meant to stay forever. Because Cancer remembers. You remember kind words. You remember beautiful moments. You remember older versions of people. Sometimes you even remember things that everyone else forgot a long time ago. And when your memory holds things so clearly, letting go can become complicated. Not because of the present, but because of the memories attached to it. The Six of Cups card enters the story like an old photo album opened after many years. The pictures are still beautiful. They can still bring a smile to your face. They can still soften your heart. But something changes as we grow older. We stop trying to climb back inside those photographs. Instead, we look, we smile, we feel grateful. And then we keep moving forward. The Six of Cups card doesn't carry the feeling of regret here. It carries the feeling of reconciliation. Reconciliation with older versions of yourself. The version that feared being left behind. The version that tried to hold on to a relationship at any cost. The version that believed loving hard enough could fix everything. The version that blamed themselves whenever something came to an end. Those versions of you were not wrong. They were simply doing the best they could with what they knew at the time. And sometimes healing isn't about changing the past. It's about looking back at the past through gentler eyes. The Temperance card appears like a river flowing quietly between two shores, never rushing, never forcing, never demanding. This card makes me think of something many people spend years trying to learn. So much of life is spent attempting to control emotions, trying to be stronger, trying to move on faster, trying to heal faster, trying to become a different person as quickly as possible. But the Temperance card doesn't seem concerned with speed. It seems concerned with balance. Cancer may be learning something important here. That peace doesn't come from forcing yourself to stop feeling. Peace comes from allowing yourself to feel without being consumed by those feelings. And that is a very different thing. A person constantly trying to control their emotions often ends up exhausted. A person who understands their emotions can sit beside them, listen to them, and eventually allow them to pass through. Like sitting by a window watching the rain. You don't have to step outside and stop it. You don't have to argue with the sky. You don't have to change the weather. You simply trust that the rain will move through in its own time. The Temperance card feels like someone placing a hand gently on Cancer's shoulder and saying, you don't have to rush. You don't have to prove that you're okay. You don't have to force yourself to let go before you're ready. Everything has its own rhythm. Every feeling has its own timeline. And perhaps the most beautiful shift happening here is that Cancer is beginning to stop seeing softness as a weakness. Your heart still responds to beautiful things. It still feels moved by old memories. It still cares deeply about people. But that gentleness is taking on a different shape now. It is no longer unconditional self-sacrifice. It is no longer putting everyone else's needs ahead of your own. It is becoming a more mature form of love, one that includes yourself. A kind of love that knows when to open the door, and also knows when to let things remain where they belong. Like someone standing beside a familiar river they have known for years. The water is still moving. The memories are still there. But for the first time in a very long time, their eyes are no longer fixed on what lies behind them. They're beginning to look toward a distant shore they never truly noticed before. They're beginning to look toward a distant shore they never truly noticed before. The Queen of Cups card appears once again, but this time she isn't sitting by a window. She isn't gazing across the water. She isn't reflecting on the past. She's standing in the very world she spent so much time building. A world that isn't especially large, isn't especially impressive from the outside. But it's a world where the heart can finally breathe. This energy makes me think of the small changes happening in Cancer's life. Waking up one morning without that familiar sense of anxiety. A weekend that isn't filled with obligations you never really wanted to attend. A conversation that ends without leaving you emotionally exhausted. A room rearranged in a way that somehow makes you feel more at ease every time you walk into it. These things may sound simple, but sometimes an entire healing journey is built from simple things. Because after years of adapting to other people's worlds, Cancer seems to be asking a different question. What about my world? How do I actually feel inside the life I'm living? Am I comfortable here? Or have I simply become used to enduring things? The Queen of Cups card doesn't answer those questions through logic. She answers them through feeling, through relief, through peace, through those moments when you no longer feel the need to become someone else in order to belong. That's why the Four of Wands card appears like a home lit warmly from within, not a physical house, but the feeling of coming home. Some people spend their entire lives searching for that feeling somewhere outside themselves, in relationships, in careers, in success, in recognition. But the Four of Wands card seems to tell a different story. A story about the moment someone begins to become a safe place for themselves. The moment you reach the end of the day and no longer feel the need to escape your own thoughts. The moment a quiet kitchen in the evening feels more comforting than a crowded room. The moment rain against the window sounds more like music than loneliness. The moment you realize that your peace no longer depends entirely on whether someone stays or leaves. And something interesting begins to happen when Cancer starts building that sense of safety within. The relationships around you begin to look different too. The question is no longer simply, who loves me? Who cares about me? Who makes time for me? The questions become deeper. Who allows me to be myself? Who helps me breathe a little easier? Who doesn't require me to shrink in order to be accepted? The Ten of Pentacles card appears like a garden that has been tended for many years. Not a perfect garden, but one cultivated with patience. This card makes me think about the value of things that last. Regular phone calls. People who keep their word. Simple meals filled with laughter. Affection that doesn't constantly demand proof. Connections that create a sense of security instead of uncertainty. Cancer has always been gifted at seeing potential in other people. You can often see the best version of someone long before they can see it themselves. That is a gift. But sometimes that same gift can keep you staying too long in places that no longer fit who you've become. The Ten of Pentacles card speaks of a new standard beginning to form. Not a standard built around perfection, a standard built around stability. What actually nourishes your life over time? What creates genuine safety? What allows your heart to rest? The Queen of Cups card sits beside the Four of Wands card. The Four of Wands card sits beside the Ten of Pentacles card. Together, they feel like three generations of a family gathered around the same dinner table. One represents emotion, one represents home. One represents the lasting values that stand the test of time. They don't say very much, yet their presence creates a feeling that is impossible to ignore. Not everything in life needs to be held on to. Only the things that truly belong in your life deserve long-term care and attention. And Cancer seems to be understanding that more deeply now, like someone closing the gate to their garden at the end of the day. Not to shut the world out, but to protect the flowers that took many seasons to grow. In the distance, the Strength card seems to be standing at the edge of that garden. Not as a warrior raising a sword, not as someone trying to prove how strong they are. This card feels more like a person who has walked through enough storms that they no longer feel the need to speak loudly. A different kind of strength is showing up in Cancer's journey now. A strength that is no longer measured by how much you can endure, no longer measured by how much you can sacrifice, no longer measured by how many people you can carry on your shoulders. It is measured by calmness, by the ability to sit with your own emotions without fear, by the ability to remain gentle in a world that often encourages people to become harder. Years ago, Cancer may have believed that being strong meant never getting hurt, never feeling vulnerable, never needing anyone. But life seems to have taught a different lesson. A heart does not have to turn into stone in order to be protected. A heart that understands its own worth rarely needs to build endless walls. It simply needs to know which doors should remain open and which doors should remain closed. The Strength card feels like someone gently placing a hand on a wild animal instead of trying to overpower it. And that image makes me think about the way Cancer is beginning to treat themselves. Less judgment, less pressure, less self-blame. You no longer feel the same need to become a different version of yourself in order to be loved. You no longer feel the need to fit into every space. You no longer feel responsible for making everyone happy. Because after enough time has passed, a simple truth starts becoming impossible to ignore. The person who has to live with your choices every single day is still you. The Chariot card appears like a vehicle moving steadily down a long road. What stands out is that this card doesn't feel fast. It feels focused. And that is a very important difference. Many people spend their lives in motion without truly moving forward. Many people stay so busy that they stop hearing their own inner voice. The Chariot card brings a different energy, an energy of direction. Cancer seems to be entering a phase where certain choices feel clearer than they once did. Not because life has become simpler, but because there is less conflict inside of you. When you know what matters, many other things naturally lose their power over you. When you know what brings you peace, the invitations that don't belong become easier to recognize. When you know the kind of life you're trying to build, saying no becomes much more natural. The Chariot card doesn't pull Cancer away from the path. It helps you keep your hands on the wheel. It reminds you that the direction of your life does not have to be determined by the loudest voice in the room. It does not have to be determined by someone else's expectations. It does not have to be determined by what once made sense in the past. Ahead stands the Seven of Wands card, like someone protecting a small lantern during a powerful windstorm. That image doesn't make me think of conflict. It makes me think of courage. Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't fighting the world. Sometimes the hardest thing is continuing to trust what you know is right when not everyone understands it. Cancer has always been sensitive to the emotions of other people. You notice disappointment. You notice disapproval. You notice the doubtful looks that others try to hide. And there may have been times when those things influenced your decisions. But the Seven of Wands card tells a different story. It speaks of someone who has learned that approval is not the foundation of a peaceful life. Some people will understand. Some people won't. Some people will support you. Some people may walk away. And those things no longer determine the value of the path you're choosing. Together, these three cards create a beautiful movement. The Strength card steadies the heart. The Chariot card provides direction. The Seven of Wands card protects what matters. This is not the energy of resistance. It is the energy of mature confidence. The kind of confidence that doesn't need to prove itself, doesn't need to argue, doesn't need to win. It simply knows what belongs in its life and remains calm enough to hold on to it. Like someone standing on their porch at the end of the day. Cars continue to pass by in the distance. The phone still lights up from time to time. The world continues pulling attention in 100 different directions, yet their eyes remain fixed on where they truly want to go. And for the first time in a very long while, that clarity no longer needs anyone else's permission to exist. And for the first time in a very long while, that clarity no longer needs anyone else's permission to exist. The High Priestess card has been there all along. What fascinates me about this card is that it never arrives as a loud guide. She doesn't stand on a mountaintop announcing the truth. She doesn't walk into a room demanding to be heard. She simply sits, she watches, she listens. She waits, much like a deeper part of Cancer has been doing throughout this entire journey. Many people spend their lives believing that answers exist somewhere outside of themselves, in someone else's advice, in a clearer sign, in a dramatic event that finally removes every doubt. But this reading seems to be ending in a different place. It makes me think about those ordinary moments. Washing dishes after dinner, folding laundry, driving down a familiar road, and then suddenly realizing you've known what you needed to know for a very long time. Not because you just discovered it, not because it was finally revealed to you, but because you became quiet enough to hear it. That is the feeling the High Priestess card brings. The feeling of recognition. Not learning more, not searching more, simply recognizing. Recognizing what causes your heart to close. Recognizing what helps it open. Recognizing what drains your energy. Recognizing what nourishes your spirit. A very simple truth begins to emerge. Your intuition never disappeared. It was simply competing with too much noise. The Two of Swords card appears one final time in this story, but it no longer stands at a crossroads. It is no longer trying to keep two possibilities perfectly balanced. It is no longer postponing an answer. This card feels like someone finally lowering their arms after standing there thinking for a very long time. Not because every fear has vanished, not because every risk has disappeared, but because standing still is no longer necessary. In life, we don't always delay decisions because we lack information. Sometimes we delay because we're hoping a different answer will appear, an easier answer, a less painful answer, a less complicated answer, an answer that asks less of us. Cancer may have spent some time in that space, keeping a door slightly open, holding onto a backup plan, holding onto a small hope that things might somehow become simpler on their own. But eventually people grow tired of standing in the middle, tired of constantly looking in two directions, tired of trying to serve two different truths at the same time. The Two of Swords card now feels like someone who finally starts walking, not running, just walking, one ordinary step. Yet sometimes a single step changes everything inside, because the energy that has been trapped finally begins to move. The questions stop circling endlessly. Attention returns to the present moment. Then the Moon card appears once again, and honestly that makes me smile, because the first card of this journey is also the last. Yet it feels completely different now. At the beginning, the Moon card felt like a road covered in fog, like things that couldn't quite be understood, like trying to piece together a puzzle with missing pieces. The fog hasn't necessarily disappeared, but the person walking through it has changed, and that's what matters. The road may still have turns ahead. Life may still hold questions that haven't been answered. Some chapters may still be unfolding, but Cancer no longer needs to see the entire map before taking the next step. That is a profound difference. The Moon card now feels like the ocean just before sunrise. The water is still deep, still mysterious, still hiding things beneath the surface. But the horizon is beginning to brighten, enough to know which direction you're moving. The High Priestess card remains quietly seated. The Two of Swords card has finally lowered its guard. The Moon card reflects a soft light across the water. Together, these cards bring this story to a close with a feeling that is deeply mature. Not the feeling of victory, not the feeling of conquest, the feeling of trust. Trust in your own rhythm. Trust in what your heart has learned. Trust in your ability to recognize what truly belongs in your life. Like someone standing on a beach in the early hours of the morning, the wind is still blowing. The waves are still moving. The world is just as vast as it has always been. But this time, they are no longer staring into the distance searching for answers. Because the thing they have been searching for all along is resting quietly within them. This was never really a story about finding a brand new answer. It was a story about Cancer finally stopping the habit of doubting what their heart has quietly known for a very long time. For so long, you may have searched for more confirmation, another sign, another explanation. another reason to feel certain. But sometimes peace doesn't come from finding more answers. Sometimes it comes from learning to trust what you've been feeling from the very beginning. The cards in this reading were never really about chasing something waiting for you out ahead. They were about the journey back to yourself, back to your intuition, back to your understanding, back to that quiet but honest voice that has always existed within you. And perhaps the greatest gift of this chapter isn't found in what may be changing around you. Perhaps it's found in the way Cancer is slowly becoming a safe place for their own heart. If today's message resonated with you in some way, leave a symbol in the comments below. I'd genuinely love to know where you're watching from and which part of this journey spoke to you the most. Thank you for spending this time here with me. I hope the days ahead feel a little more peaceful, a little gentler, and a little kinder to your heart. And I'll see you again in the next reading.